All right, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the Port of Newport regular monthly commission meeting to order. Just a reminder to folks in the audience, if you'd like to speak to something specific in the agenda, you're welcome to fill out one of the forms that are in the back of the room behind Karen. Otherwise, there'll be a public comment section at the beginning of the meeting and then again at the end. So, any changes to the agenda? Nothing heard on that. So we'll move into our first public comment section. If anybody would like to make a comment, please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Rex Capri from Newport. Good evening. I'd like to address the commission tonight. I'd like to ask them to prioritize planning and implementation of finding new and additional users to the Newport International Terminal facility. This is a port facility that has the greatest potential to bring in new revenue, much needed revenue, and to stimulate economic growth in this community. And as we know, most of the people in this room know, this thing was completed in 2013, ready for new users, and it's language for the last 5 years. Now, I think it's time to make good to the public that entrusted their faith in you to do their will when they passed that bond measure and took on the debt, the majority debt for the renovation of this facility. And I think it's your responsibility to make sure that something happens and happens soon, because it's just not tenable to do this to the public that entrusted their faith in. So I would ask again that you put this at a high priority for the commission on your agenda of things to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at this point? Okay. Nothing else heard. We'll move into the next agenda item, which is the consent calendar. Has everyone had a chance to review the consent calendar? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. If there are no issues associated with that, I'll need a motion to accept the consent calendar as written.
I'd like to make one comment.
Mm-hmm.
That these reports are so wonderful to see finally a comparison year to year that means things and are correct. And there's our hero walking in the door. But, just to see this finally, something, just looking through this, you can see trends. No, I don't need to know what 3 minutes of the DCD guide time was, but the more information you have, the more it's so easy to see trends of, mortgage. Obviously, there's busier, slower times a year. To see that all reflected in the numbers is a thank you, Mark and company. And all of us relate to at this point.
Perfect timing, Mark.
Yes, time now. I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we'll move into accounts paid. Anyone have any questions, comments about accounts paid?
No.
To echo a bit of what Sarah had mentioned, everybody okay with the layout that we're seeing here? Just to make sure that Mark has that feedback. So,
yes.
Mark, any thoughts or comments you want to provide to anybody on that?
This layout works for you. That's great. There's a few things that can be changed if you want to. Maybe more with the columns. If you want to see something more or less, we can change that. This is great for you. It's certainly a lot easier for us. So.
Okay. I think your feedback is there. I think people are happy with it. Okay. The next item, new business, would be a website preview. And Terry, I think you were going to, or Karen, one of the two of you guys?
Like Karen, the master of the website, take it.
This has been a lot of fun to play with, by the way, but I want to repeat everything in the report. The current website went live in June of 2009. and some of the material was developed from 2007 on. So it is outdated. It's also, because of when it was developed, it's not easy to change. We don't have a lot of flexibility in what we can control on that website. So when we want to make changes, it's either to a page that I've managed to make changes, which is why the home page has like everything on it, because I can change that page, or we have to actually hire our developer on an hourly basis to make changes. So this product is through Streamline, who developed this tool specifically for special districts. And SDAO has partnered with them to offer some good rates on those. I didn't get out of focus, it was focused earlier. But so I'm thrilled to be playing with it. So I've been working with the Sandbox version of this. This is what I'm showing you, which is why it says website under construction. I apologize for the focus. Okay, good. One of the advantages of the Streamline product, because it's designed for special district, it does conform to some of the requirements for public transparency. And it keeps those features in mind when designing the options that we have for this. And things like commission meetings and how that is played out in here is specific to special districts. The company also, this is a relatively new product for them. And they're always getting feedback from the users and updating, and all the updates are included as part of the plan. So I wanted to show you a little bit about what we've done so far and some comments. So one of the things I like about it is it's easier for a user to navigate. I don't know if you've tried our current website, but it seems like some things hide. So part of this, the idea behind this is to get it so things aren't hiding anymore. Look at this. So this carousel, we can change anytime we want to. Our current images, we can't. So I chose, for example, to put our two director level positions right on the carousel. And when you put them in order, this would be the first thing somebody would see when they open the website. And we can do that for whatever we want to see. We want people to see right away. And then this is an overview and then our mission. So these are what I chose, for now at least, to be the headlines, shall we say. Some of the things that would be more standard are, these are our facilities. It's also, one of the things about it being clean, by the way, I'll just throw this in here, it also makes it ADA compliant in doing so. So a lot of this text I've actually taken from our current website. Those are things that we could potentially review and update. So I tried to keep only things that were still relevant. This was an experiment in a picture carousel within that page. Now everything here is on the page itself. This book now, there's also a new Hercules, which is our reservation system, also has an updated tool, which actually looks very nice with arrows. So where they can make the reservations online.
What do you mean by Hercules?
Hercules is our reservation system program.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we use in South Beach.
Got it.
Happy Hour beers and new users. I really can't see everything. Should open my laptop so I can see. It should be returned by then. I'll have to get the Hercules on that. So in arranging this menu, what I tried to think about was, what do people want to see? And what do we want them to be able to find? So the about is pretty standard. Some of these you can access from other places. Commission administration is what I thought would be something people would be looking for, and it makes commission meetings easier to find. And one of the things I like about the commission meetings, go down to one that has more complete information. So I can put these up as soon as they're ready. I can see them right away. They do open in a separate page for people. But I think this would be easier to find compared to right now where it's like under general information. And then you have to kind of say, you like know where it is. This is another thing I like is that the meeting audio is still YouTube, but it's embedded instead of linking out to YouTube. Commission administration, you want to see your pictures?
No.
No.
So, but we can also put in here, click. They can put an email right here.
Can you get rid of that tab?
I can.
Fan mail.
I can get rid of it or include it, whatever you're interested in. An option, like I said, this is a preview, and feedback is what I'm looking for. If we wanted to add this option for people who read our website to request being added to the email notification list, they can go right here. This right now goes to me. Some of these things, like contact information, actually appears in a couple places. This is not really something that I think is what I want it to be yet, because I don't know if this is the right title. Maybe to contact the court, and we'll decide who it goes to. The online reservation system is another big thing that people come to use, and so these are the two options for them. These again, you'll get, these are the two same pages. That's nothing I like. The same page can be linked from several locations, so there's consistency in that. You don't have to create a new page each time you link from a current one. RFPs, RFQs, court facilities. This is really a repeat, but people look in different places, so I put it there too. Job openings, policies and documents. There's not much in here yet, because that's really more of a workforce kind of thing. And this is something that I think is kind of reflective of who we want to be. And so if you want to just look at what kind of public information might be available.
Does that give you an option to submit a public records request? Is there a button for that?
There it is. And I can make that color if you want.
We just might want to also have it under
We could.
I'm just thinking that's where people might look for.
Mm-hmm.
Public records request policy,
Yeah.
probably links here. Yeah.
Links to that same page.
Yeah.
There is a search option. So if you're not finding what you want, what do you want to search for?
Rates.
Pizza.
Tell you the different places where you can find it,
Mm-hmm.
which we don't have right now on our current website.
Did you want to talk a little bit, or did you get any ability to have analytics associated with this?
Google Analytics, I have that associated with. Of course, it's not really live, so there's no data. But that is an option with this. Is we can, and I have actually hooked us up with Google Analytics, so we can get some feedback as to where people are going, what they're looking at, in addition to just the feedback from YouTube on the audio. I mean, that's the only feedback I have right now.
I think that's a really good, powerful thing to see how people are using it. Is it an additional cost above the $300, or is it included in that?
That's included in that. So it's $300 a month. That includes the hosting. It includes, of course, the product. It includes all updates. It includes all support. So it's very comprehensive in what they offer. I have found in creating the sandbox them to be very helpful and providing a lot of feedback already when I'm paying it. So my personal recommendation is not wait till it be entirely populated. I would suggest that we use this sooner rather than later. A website's never complete anyway.
It's a living document.
But yes. So I'd like to, Streamline can help me capture all of the data on a current website so that we don't lose it. And then we can add or subtract what we think is most valuable. The thing I think I want feedback most from you tonight is things that you'd like to see or things that you'd like to see differently or ideas you have about what people should have easy access to. Because that was kind of my goal in setting up the menu.
Well, is the sandbox is offline, right? People can't.
No, they actually could. I mean, it's not inaccessible. We just don't have it advertised.
I'm just wondering if it would be productive to maybe provide the sandbox link to the commissioners and they can
Absolutely.
poke around at it.
Absolutely.
If people feel that would be.
So any first impressions? I'd love to hear some.
I think it's much better than the old one. And everything's like this instead of like that. It's more intuitive, I think. And so it's a little more up to date. And one thing I think that people, when they're looking at the port, just to see what it's all about, they'd be going to the facilities. And I just wonder in there, and I'm sure we have that, but it needs to be dressed, a lot of stuff needs to be dressed up, but that they could see, they have sport fishing. I wonder how I get a hold of the sport fishing guys. And then they could give you their beautiful pictures of their happy customers. So I don't know how much
sport fishing guys, you mean like the charter businesses?
Yeah, the charter guys, or just sport fishing in general.
And certainly one page that I haven't included yet and will are links.
Right.
If I did some, just so you can kind of see what in the quick links there's. So Newport Fisherman's Watch is one right there. But that's something that can be much more developed. Let me look for something here. Okay, on that. This is associated with the RB page.
What does Captain Reels, would that show us his site? I mean, if they knew what they were doing this on our site too. Then
Yeah, I've linked it to their website. Although theirs has expired. Perfect example. Perfect example. So I'm sure there are others that have kept theirs up. But yes, I put those links in there so they can link right to it. Rather than advertise for them, let them tell us what they want.
Right.
Have the various different departments had a chance to review this?
Not yet,
The staff? Okay. So you'll get feedback from
Absolutely.
everybody there,
Yeah, this is really at this point just me ready to start showing people what's being developed.
How long do you think it would take you to populate to an acceptable level to make it live?
I like to think that by January 1st it would be usable. And that's one of the things I want feedback, not just from you, but from staff. What should we make sure is there now?
Right. I think what Stuart suggested is how to give us the ability to look at it and surf around, and
I will email you.
sounds good.
Do it.
And then does it fit well within any type of budget restriction and the proper fund and all of that?
Yeah, I think it's $300 a month, right?
Yeah, we have the,
So $3,600 a year, it's not
right. We have the resources
be fine.
to do this now. There's
Yeah.
no, yeah.
Oh, one thing I didn't mention is it's mobile friendly and responsive.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So it's a different
Our
format.
current one is not, so
I think that's that.
which I think is really important.
I think it's a great direction.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to be updated anyway,
Exactly.
and be able to be in control of it is really good. And
I think
timely.
that's one of the biggest things.
Mm-hmm.
How much does our website cost now?
You pay a yearly fee of, it's not that much really.
Well, you don't get that
The
much.
biggest thing is that we have to pay hourly anytime we want to
Yeah.
make a change. So it's not just the cost, it's also the time and
Frustration.
the frustration and the limits that we have in making it look the way we want.
Yeah, it sounds really good.
Is it OPPA also uses Streamline? I think? No, it's
Yeah,
Yeah.
Florida Public Ports Association.
that's another website that uses this same platform.
And it's all kind of brandy new, so it'll be kind of a cool thing for at least 6 months.
Okay, hey, I'm going to keep it cool, but we will be able to use our same domain name when we go live. So anybody who's looking for PortaNewport.com will still find us.
Jeff?
I think it's a big upgrade visually and functionally, the mobile part. And you had a line in your memo saying this is important for the RV park reservation system. And that right there is probably worth the price of admission because it's such a, business is electronic and got to be up to date. And it's so important to the port. So I think that right there makes it worth it. I saw media releases there. It could be that could be something that I could foresee being maybe a bigger part, have its own box with a picture that draws people's eyes to it. That a lot of times we'll see an article in the paper and we look at it and we're like, well, that's we'd like to have some positive stories in there too that maybe aren't getting out there.
Right.
And maybe this could be a helpful tool as well to tie those into this website. Just a thought.
And there are a couple ways to make that more visible, maybe. One would be maybe adding it up here in place of something else or combining some things. I wouldn't want to add too much more to this menu because I think the bigger it gets, the messier it looks. But it could be here.
I was thinking, well, yeah, it could be there. I was thinking as you scroll down, I think that's real interesting. It catches your eye, the commercial, marine, and each section there. There could be another box, media releases, and a picture that sort of captures somebody's interest.
Absolutely.
Because people are, we're rather simple. We're visual, we surf, and oh, this is neat. What is this?
And that would be easy to do, just to add another column. Well, even something at the top, that would be the first thing you see is media releases. When we could get
You can take some of the reports that sometimes have information, expand on them. It doesn't have to be fancy, but picture, a paragraph, and hey, this is what's going on, or this is, it could be a small story of what's going on at the port down anywhere. Just a quick blurb.
and because the ease of change, we could do it as students want to. And Barb Dudley, by the way, one of our mates, is taking some pictures, some updated pictures for our website too.
Is that them? You have
Not yet.
okay.
Not yet. This is this picture of Ken Gagnon, who's not taking pictures of us anymore, but
I think the picture thing kind of goes along with what you were mentioning to, alluding to a little bit, Jeff, is I like pictures. I'm a visual person, and I think it draws people quick. I almost feel like, there's an opportunity even for a picture section someplace associated with the facilities, you know, so that not only can people see the layout, but, you know, in some ways, I wasn't sure if this is where you're going with the charter boats, but, you know, like if there's somebody having a good time, let's put the picture up of sorts, you know, come to the port.
We can add as a picture
Yeah.
carousel to any of these pages.
Yeah.
It's also a nice way to kind of highlight a big project that the crew has done, you know, highlighting the workers when they're really doing cool stuff.
Yeah, there have been studies that have shown that placing people in websites, pictures of people, makes it more attractive to people. So if you want to, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get some updated pictures, more pictures of staff doing what staff does.
Yeah.
And the photos makes it more identifiable to other people.
This is one of the ways to do that. This is a carousel that you can put on a page. Well,
I need more pictures.
I know. I just picked a couple to show what a carousel would look like. But yes, we need definitely more pictures, especially the RV park, because there have been quite a few upgrades to it.
Yeah, then you see the face attached to, oh, that's a port person, flag them down.
Well, and, you know, put a caption in there. Welcome to the RV park. There he is. And then there's also the staff who's Sue page. And if you click on any of them, I clicked on finance staff. That's friendly face there.
Look at that.
And we have the ability to change it.
Yeah. So there's a way where they can.
I think one of the things that might not get to the level of media releases like Terry was talking about, but also might be good to have up here is sort of news around the port. You know, like I was thinking about the level of activity at the international terminal that's here and coming. You know, let's put it up there. And what's going on next to the port at the Rondas property. You know, it might, you know, we could really turn this into a go-to place for people who want to know what's going on in the area, at least from the port's perspective.
Right.
So I think, you know, I don't know how you work it in, like you say, you run out of real estate quick, but I think news of the port is something that has sort of lacked in our ability to present, hey, you know, here's what's going on in the port, and if you want more information, you can go listen to the minutes here, or you can speak with these people, as opposed to relying exclusively on other media outlets for some of that.
So there are a couple places we could add something, and like I said, my worries get like too much where you have to scroll down. I think the more you see quickly, the better. So how to do that most effectively.
I have an example of, I've been getting asked by fishermen out at the terminals because they're seeing these big trucks going by out in the field. What's going on?
Right.
You know, and so that would be great. And what they also, you know, a couple of them like, what are they? And I said, you know, it's industrial zone. That's their first phase, and they're putting in an industrial park and sheds. Oh, well, how do I get a hold of them? You know, I don't have that. But in your search, if you wrote Ronnie's Inc., it would come up in all kinds of places.
Right.
And stuff, so.
Which I think that searchability is also one of the big advantages of this.
Right.
All right. Well, I just wanted to give you a preview and see what they've been busy working on.
Yeah, good.
Nice job.
Very nice.
So you'll send it out, and the commission can provide you feedback either via email or at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Karen. All righty. There's nothing else on that?
Nothing else on that right now.
Okay. So we can move on to the next item on our agenda, which is, Mark, I believe that's your report.
So my report this month doesn't have too much in it. I've been gone for 2 weeks. But you obviously review the financial statements and the accounts pay report. One of the things that we're working on too is the banks that we do business with. We're updating all of our signature cards. There's one bank in particular where I don't this week, finding my trail again, so that's why there's not so much there.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions for Mark? Just out of curiosity, I know I was in the office a week or so ago, and I noticed Todd was there working on some stuff. Any just high-level brief summary of that you want to update the commission on what he's working on now?
So
Go ahead.
Yeah, either one of you.
So
Yeah.
He's going to help us a little bit with some other things. So
he's been working on the financial policies manual, procurement manual, which has to do with our billing, purchase order, budgeting area, collections, so our billing, accounts receivable, collections, procedure process. I believe those manuals have been on a to-do list for a number of years. So it's nice to start to see some things come together. We know what to do in these different areas, but nothing's ever been written down. So as we get new staff, trying to give them something that they can review information. So that's helpful. Obviously with the bank accounts, consolidation of bank accounts, we have 20-some bank accounts, and we feel that it's best to, a good time to consolidate some of those. He's been helping with our audit. When he was here a couple weeks ago, he actually did the financial statements that were in here when I was gone. So he's offering support there.
yeah, the other thing I would add is that we asked Todd to do some of the financial analysis work for the strategic business plan and capital facilities plan. And so we pulled that piece out of the consultant work because it's so similar to some of the work that Todd did and presented here a year ago. And so he's going to tune up those numbers with today's figures, and that I think we'll ask him again to come and present those figures to you probably after the first of the year. But because it's good just so you, as you mentioned, Sarah, it's just good to see these numbers and familiarize yourself, and I think it should be a regular sort of an annual report. And he'll be working with the economist on the team who works for BST, Brian Winningham, once he does some of his market analysis work, and he will work with Brian to provide any kind of financial analysis that Brian needs. And I think there may be some things that they need that are beyond what Todd really has the direct experience to provide, and so Todd will help us find someone to facilitate that. So, Todd's already doing some of this work for us, so I thought it made sense to not pay for that twice. And he's already done a lot of the research to put some of this information together, so it's much quicker for him to do it a second time. So he's doing that, and as Mark mentioned, those procedures and ultimately policy manuals that will bring a number of those forward for you to review and adopt some of those as appropriate, the policies. I think the interesting thing is so many agencies I've worked in different departments within agencies, there are these informal procedures, but it just hasn't been documented. And so it's just, Todd he's taking from his experience at the Port of Astoria and some of the other areas he's worked and where he did the same kinds of things. And so he's using best practices where it's appropriate, and it just moves us to that next level, of just sort of professionalizing and standardizing those things. So, as Mark said, it's just really helpful to have somebody who can focus on that, because he's not distracted by the day-to-day fun.
And the toughest part is getting it written. You'll update them as you go.
Sure.
I mean, as you mentioned, these are also living documents.
Yeah.
But that first step is just so hard to get rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's been really helpful, and been sort of gone with the flow. And when we asked him to do different, when Mark was out for a couple of weeks, I said, hey, can you make sure we have the information for our commission packet? And, you know, I mean, he's just willing to do that. And he's been really helpful. So, he's great.
Perfect. Thanks. Anybody have any other thoughts, questions for Mark?
I have a question that might fit into Terry's report, but since we're talking about Todd, is there any, what are our thoughts on the audit being postponed?
I have some comments about that in my...
You want to wait for that? Okay.
Well, we'll wait for that.
Okay.
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay. Anything else for Mark?
Nope.
And let's move on to our next agenda item here, which is the Director of Operations here.
Thank you. So we're starting to get ready for crab season on the commercial side. The terminal's got more Dungeness boats using the space out there this year than we had previously last year. And as I understand, we had a little bit more last year than we had the year before. So that's something to be aware of. Over in the commercial marina, same thing's going on there. Everybody's getting their pots ready and they're getting ready to fish as soon as the season opens. The RV park slowed as it usually does this time of year. Bergeson plans to start preparing the NOAA, the dredge disposal site, here later this week, possibly into next. And they plan to start up dredging operations after Christmas. They had to order some parts from Europe, and they had to come over on ships. So they're going to be, which works fine for us because we're in the final phase of the permitting for it anyway. So we should have those just in time. City of Newport, sand off of the site this year has been a real challenge. There's a lot of people that want sand this year. So it's all happening at a very inconvenient time for us because they need to start, reconfiguring the pile so that they can properly, drain what comes off when they dredge. So it's been a bit of a coordination challenge, but we've had a lot of people looking for sand this year. Rondis has run into some clean fill that's not buildable, and it appears they're going to want that removed. Well, they are going to want that removed from their property. It's covered under the terms of the lease amendment. I've got some photos in here, and I mentioned it later on. I'll touch on it here in a minute, but that's going to be a challenge we're going to need addressed in the coming year or so. Most of the work I've done this month, it revolves around planning work and pursuing funding for the Port Dock 5 pier replacement and working on those final plans. That's been the bulk of my time. So, and Fisherman's Appreciation Day went well in the commercial arena. On the Port Dock 5 pier project, I was hoping to be able to have the final plans for this meeting, but we missed that window, obviously. So they should be out here in the next week or two. We've had some challenges in the electrical engineering side on that project. The current panel that leads down to the dock, I think I mentioned a couple last meeting, maybe the meeting before. In the wintertime, when a lot of boats are pumping on crab, there have been a couple of occasions in years past that breakers had tripped down there. Sure enough, that panel is operating over its capacity. So the real challenge is that the transformer up on the street is at max capacity already. So if we're going to in-crew, we can't just add more capacity on the dock. So what it's probably going to have to look like is that in order to get the engineer to stamp the plans, we're going to have to shut down 8 breakers down on the pedestals themselves. So there's going to be it'll be some impact on the dock. It won't be there's 4 breakers per pedestal in most cases, so that gives you an idea of about how many short ties that is. But nonetheless, we're already at capacity. We basically are filled up. We're going to have to do about 8 breakers though, probably when this is all said and done. We're still within the scope of the engineering contract. I just want to remind the Commission that earlier this year that there were a couple of line items that were carried forward from the previous budget year. That was all approved by the Port Commission. but we're still under budget and moving as planned. Should be able to get final approval of the plans by the 14th of December. And regarding the EDA request, the EDA grant request, that's a 50% fund match toward the completion of the project. Of course, it's an economic development grant in itself, so it requires us to take an economic development stance for the project. Fortunately, it fits very well, and so far the people within the EDA have been receptive to the project, as has Cascade West Economic Development District as well. So basically, as I explained, we were talking at the City Council meeting recently, if you view Port Dock 7 and Port Dock 5 and Port Dock 3 as a business incubator, that's basically what they are. It's the biggest incubator in the county, pretty much. It's absolutely vital to the local industry, and as I mentioned before, we're filled up. We have additional people that want to come in regularly. So, you know, this project is basically, if you view it as a gateway to further expansion and establishment of the marina of the future, that makes a very good, I think, a compelling case for a grant. If we just say, hey, we got this old pier we got to replace, and we view it like that, that doesn't do very well. But I think that's the proper stance to take with it. It's not difficult to write when you approach it from that angle. I think my biggest challenge is, as I've said before, it would be helpful if we took a more proactive stance in that regard in identifying what our goal is with the marina. Hopefully we can get that out of our strategic business plan process, because I think that it starts making us go in a direction which helps people jump on board. So I think it's a very good project, and that's kind of where I've been getting ready for the grant. I hope to be able to have that done by the 1st of December, but I'm probably going to miss that date by a short time. Any questions so far?
You talked to Central Lincoln about the feasibility of upgrading that transformer.
I haven't had that discussion with them directly, and I need to get down to what we're going to have to do is we have to have one of their engineers take a look at it. It's probably going to take, because I've done some of that recently with them, it usually takes a couple, 3 weeks sometimes if you push them. The trouble is I kind of lean on them a couple times about getting things to us quickly, and so the bucket only goes to the well so many times. So
I've dealt with it recently too, and Jake Pettis is no longer doing the on-site engineering. A woman named Faye is, and she's not as apt to go to the field or as quick to respond. So
right. So that's going to be something, and I kind of tabled it in favor of other things I needed to do anyway, because upgrading, it's all very well. You could really go down the rabbit hole. There's all kinds of things that need to be done down there. So, we opted to go with a larger conduit, so later on 50 amp service can be pulled. The conductors can be pulled through there. The pedestals are obsolete down the docks and at the end of their lifespan. But you can't just put new pedestals in without adding the infrastructure, in my opinion. Otherwise, you're kind of thrown. If you put 30 amp pedestals in, they're going to have to get replaced very soon anyway, because we want to put 50 amp pedestals in. So I kind of tabled it because it got to be a larger and larger thing that I thought, we're not going to be able to do it right now. In any case.
Aaron, you mentioned in your summary about hoist docks a bit. Are we all square on the hoists over there and the cranes? I mean, in terms of, for a while we were dealing with electrical issues, especially at high tides and things like that. Are the cranes themselves and hoists working at this point as well as they can? Yeah,
they're working as well as they can. We still have that issue with the under the pier. I believe it's 480. I don't think it's 220. I think it's 480 under there. But we still need to move that. The conductors, it's going to be expensive. And then additionally getting up underneath there, because it's out at the end of the pier, on the water side, so it's going to be physically a difficult thing to do as well. But we still need to do that project. As far as we added a bunch of 110 circuits and outlets down there. So I think going into this winter, when the buyers are down there running pumps and doing their work, I think we're going to be in a much better position as far as that goes. But that's like I said, we didn't move those high voltage conductors yet, so that still needs to be done. But
in terms of the viability of the place to get ready for a heavy season, I guess it's as good as it can get at
we've
this
done
point.
what we could do this year. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
So.
Go ahead.
We've been in touch with Berger ABM on their study on the road seawall. So they're getting to the end of their analysis. They looked very heavily at the soldier pilings that hold, because it's they're H-beams that are driven into the bottom, and then you have slabs of concrete that are slid in and lined up for the wall. So the soldier pilings themselves are degraded to a point that it's within a safety margin, which means that it is, if the wall was designed in its current state, it would be past its lifespan, right? It would already have failed. So we're into the point now where it's definitely reached the end of its life. And now there's always a safety margin at the end of that they engineer into projects, and we're in that margin. They will give us a much more definite time frame on how long we can expect before that wall were to seriously fail. But that was mainly regarding the pilings themselves. We still need to look at the concrete more closely as well to determine, how close some of that stuff is to failing. I don't know that all of that work's going to be able to be done in this study, but this will get us closer to answering that question when somebody asks you how bad is it. You'll be able to give a much more definite answer on how bad it really is. They're currently considering repair options. He did say that they don't believe we have to replace it. He said he believes that there's a number of options that we can employ that will extend the life of it, and he doesn't think we're going to have to replace the whole thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Sarah, go ahead. You had a question for me?
No, it's all right. I just kind of answered. I guess my question was, are they seeing any physical symptoms of the failing structure within the inside walls of road? Or?
Yeah, they're still debating on what's causing any kind of settlement inside the facility itself, but there's definitely signs inside there of movement in the slab. They're still debating on whether or not that's related to the wall. But it definitely has. You can go in there and you can see up against. It was built in '78. It's been used heavily. So there's definitely some movement in there, but they're not sure if that's tied into the wall yet. So. They aim to be able to extend the life for several decades. They figure that's probably the most cost-effective way to roll. They'll be providing us with an expected timeline until failure, like I said. And we should have that around mid-January or so. NOAA dredging, I mentioned that earlier. I covered that already. So we got rid of those excess property items that I mentioned last meeting. There was some old wooden pilings out there piled up. Those are gone. Rondis and the owner of those rail cars have worked out some sort of arrangement to be able to get those disposed of. So I put some pictures in here. Unfortunately, they're in black and white. It's kind of hard to tell. But they've come across some unbuildable but clean material, as it's defined in our agreement with the. That's the best way to describe it. So that first photo, if you look at, there's some darker gray material toward the center of that pile. The light gray, haze gray material that's along the top and sort of along the face of the sand. That's what they want. So about that top 1 foot layer or so of that pile right there, that's a cross section of one of the piles to the north, is what's usable. Everything else underneath of it is not. And this is what's placed. This is the material that's placed toward the northern end of that property. So there's a lot of that that's going to have to be removed. What you're looking on that second picture everything in the foreground, that long pile in the foreground of dark material is not usable. And if you look in the background of that photo, you'll see on that sand berm there's a dark layer that's along the bottom about 2 or 3 foot of that pile. That dark layer is exactly what's in the foreground. It's not usable. And you can get a close-up picture of that stuff. That's what the next picture is. It's got the consistency of like pottery clay. It's between that, and then there's a lot of organics in it too. So within that pile there'll be a mixture of stuff that looks like peat moss, and then this clay type stuff. So it's not good for structural fill. You can't build on it. They estimated the last time I talked to them was between 4,000 and 5,000 cubic yards. So there's limited choices on what you can do with it right now. Obviously, like if they give us written notice, then I anticipate they will. We have 60 days to remove it from the property. If we remove it from the property, we don't have too many options to be able to place it in a cost-effective manner. We could put it over on our 9 acres. Trouble is it's not good structural fill, so if you put it down and then later on you want to build on it, you got to pull all of it back up again. Seemed to me that about the most cost, so we have an arrangement with the city that's a memorandum of understanding, it's in writing, that the city has access to our structural fill that's out on the NOAA disposal site, and we can deposit anything that's not usable out at the airport for no cost. So between the issue, if we're getting ready to dredge out there, like I said, operationally we've got a challenge trying to make everything work while people are taking sand off the pile. I said it would be way easier and cheaper for us to not mess with the pile until springtime. Ron just wants good fill from our pile over here. So that's a commodity that we have that benefits them. And so what I suggested was that we wait until springtime if they could put it off that long, and then we'd be able to move this unusable fill out to the airport, dump it, and then on the return trip come through here and give them usable fill. And then what the cost is, I'm not sure yet, but that method is probably about the cheapest way to go about it, because then you have to touch the material twice, and you get something off the return trip from the trucks. So that's the idea that we came up with, and it seems to work for everybody. But hey, if anybody's got a better idea, I'll be all ears.
Good idea.
Yeah, it is. Empty truck is empty.
So that's where we're at with that stuff. Southeast Marina Docks. So our routine 5-year assessment of port assets came due, so they were out doing the insurance assessment and going around to everything. And then I noticed that he didn't ask to he took pictures of basically everything, asked a lot of questions. He didn't ask any questions about the docks in South Beach. And I asked him why, and he said, well, it's not on his insurance schedule, and that came from SDIS. So what we found is that the docks in South Beach have not been insured. And it's been like that for a long time. It's been like that. At least I got an email today that says it goes back to the 7th. What I mean is property insurance. It's not liability. So if something happened down there and somebody's boat got damaged as a result, they would be reimbursed by our insurance company, but our docks would not be replaced. So I've done a little bit of digging. I emailed both Don Mann and Kevin Greenwood to see if they knew anything about it. Our insurance company didn't really. He said he wasn't sure either. But he's going to go back and ask Mark Colson if he has any background information. But the initial thing that I've heard is that everybody was under the impression that they were insured. So it's quite possible. The way this thing happens is if you just pay attention to taking pictures of stuff on the checklist, you might overlook the fact that the docks are not on there. You're just going down the checklist taking photos. And I think that might have been what occurred. It's either that or the port made a conscientious choice not to insure the docks because they didn't think the risk was great enough. Kind of doubt that. I wouldn't recommend it. I think it sounds like the insurance premium is in the ballpark of someplace around $15,000 to $18,000 a year. So. But the thing of it is we have property insurance on everything that's over on the commercial side. And the odd thing about that is like, for example, fire hazard. Over here these are basically all glass boats with gasoline, and over there it's a lot of steel with diesel. And so, I would recommend insuring this at least to the same degree as what we got the got the commercial marine insured too. We got a lot of wood pilings over here too. It's a lot more wood pilings. So the insurance company is supposed to give us a quote on what those premiums would look like, and we should have an answer for that on that for the next meeting or sooner. I've been a part of the community advisory committee for the Equina Bay Brownfields Initiative. There's $600,000 available in the county for brownfields projects. Excuse me. The coalition that came together that sought that money is based mainly in Newport and Toledo. So probably for this go round, Newport and Toledo will be at the top of the list for these projects. It's something to be aware of. They can fund studies on, if there's some property that's not being developed because there's some concern over whether or not it might have contaminated soil. They can fund studies to clear that issue up, to come up with a definitive answer. Or if you have contaminated soil, obviously, they can fund that as well. $600,000 is a sizable amount. It's more than what most get, but it's it's only going to go so far on a project. And there are a couple in the county that are at they're pretty high priority that are going to compete really well. So maintenance crew's been really busy. They fabricated a new aluminum fish bucket that's a different design than what we used over there before. We've used galvanized at this point. This thing's got a lot of advantages to it design-wise. They're the ones that haul all those pilings away at McLean Point. They've been filling in a little bit, helping them on here and there too. We probably are going to be able to save some money this year on the capital improvement list. There's repairs to the camel system at NOAA, and I think they're going to be able to do that work and save quite a bit of money. So that'll be a good thing. They're already working on a couple, designing some solutions. And I can't say enough about, especially Pat's ability to design and fabricate. I mean, he's definitely a top-notch individual when it comes to that stuff. So the rest of my report's in there, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have. Yes?
Are we signed up for anything out of the Equina Bay Brownfields Initiative, just for the good girl, get all of it, get our name in there, or do we have any identified tidbits?
The nearest thing, so what what we're trying to do right now is set some criteria by which they can sort the projects and compete them. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like, so one example that I thought of was not necessarily on core property, but it might benefit Rondis because they've got certain areas like where they had those, they had a couple kilns out there in that bight, and so there might be some concern over the soil there, and that might be a project. But it really is going to matter how the criteria shakes out, because if they're looking to get, if they're looking to say fund like 2 or 3 really big projects, something that's smaller may not compete as well. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to jump on that committee is I can keep my eyes out for certain things, and I was really interested. It's unfortunate, but anything that's in tidelands doesn't count. So it has to be on upland of the high water mark, basically. So, but it also applies to buildings, asbestos abatement, things like that. But it sounds like the recommendations are going to be more toward anything that drains into the watershed, and projects of that nature. So you might be able to find some.
Sounds good, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Jim.
So the EDA grant, just curious about, I know there isn't a specific timeline, but what expected timeline as far as submittal, hearing back, or how does the process work?
So you put once you get everything together, you compile. There's it's 5 different forms that have to be written up, and then you put it into their electronic system, and then we get as many letters of support from people as we possibly can, and through contact with all the state representatives and pushing the political process as hard as we possibly can, you can possibly get an answer within like 2 or 3 months or so after submittal, is what I understand. I've looked around at a couple other grants that were done around the country, and it seems to be that's about normal. So
Okay.
That's about what the time. But you asked the second part to that question. Did I miss something there?
No, that was basically it.
Okay.
Also curious if there's any other potential funding sources out there that are worth digging into, looking under every rock for anywhere there's money.
I would say one of the best fits for this is going to be in the springtime. They're going to come out for build grants again, and that's another federal grant. I think we should definitely put in for that. I'll have to go through the grant criteria whenever they put out the notice of funding opportunity one more time to make sure if it fits well. I think it's going to. So the Oregon Public Ports Association also asked for shovel-ready projects from all ports. I really do think that this particular project is it's really well suited for that type of stuff. It's a simple project, and it really is a shovel-ready project. We already have the permits, the plans will be in place. We just need to get it going, and it fits everybody's timeline. I think one of the main keys to it, though, especially at that level, is going to be our ability to get our representatives on board with the project and support it. Oregon Public Ports Association will push it as hard as they can, but I understand that, the more that we can prepare them to hear, hey, this project's coming, the better off we are. And I really do think it's a good, one of the things to point out with it as we talk to people is that it's not just economic development. It's not just, we got to remember there's fuel lines attached to it. And so if the pier fails at some point, it's not just a matter of practicality of access to boats. There could be a serious environmental issue on top of the fact it's probably going to shut our fuel dock down. And those are heavy impacts to the industry and the region. And that's the other thing. We want to look outside the community. We really want to tie it to the regional, the good for the entire region. And I think we can very easily make a case for it. So,
is that a matching grant as well?
You're talking
Oregon
about
Public
grant?
Ports.
I'm sorry?
Oregon Public Ports.
That is money from the state budget, is what it is.
Okay.
So it might seem.
So we could use that for a match against an EDA grant.
I believe we can, yes. The Port of Brookings got one just last year. And they've had a lot of challenges, but they were able to get funding through the state for a project they had. I can't remember what it was, but they just.
What kind of dollars and cents are we talking about on those?
Couldn't tell you the range of it, but I do know that it fit. It did fit because we were I think the first ones probably to turn the information in, and it fit right in what they were looking for. So
You talked about tying into the region. The seafood distribution chain is pretty big and extends out and benefits through the state, and just the tax-based revenue. There's one right there. You can probably start adding up tens of millions of dollars of economic activity that the boats at that dock are a conduit for that activity. So
I think it's really helpful if we take that. So one of the biggest challenges that I run into is I can get numbers on all of that, right? But I would like to be able to represent it as a percentage of gross domestic product for the state, because that ties it into people who are not any way whatsoever, they believe, associated with the seafood supply chain. Like I said, it brings it home to them. If you can say, look, it's a percentage of gross domestic product for the state of Oregon. I suspect it's going to be a considerable percentage, but I don't have the numbers right now. I've worked with Heather Mance, giving me a lot of numbers on how the Port of Newport stacks up in comparison to dollars from seafood nationally, statewide, and that's good. But I think we would benefit most from jump outside the industry, and show what it does for the state as a whole, because that's how you make people in Eastern Oregon care about it. I think,
Mm-hmm.
So
in a tax base.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And this may be premature, but do we anticipate the same type of conundrum and activity once we get the evaluations back, I think in January, on some repair options on the rogue seawall?
Well, yeah, it depends on what comes out of that report, I guess. It depends, if they say we have like 3 years or something like that, we want to start moving on it. I don't think that's going to be quite like that. As I sit here right now, what I expect is that I'm more concerned about Port Dock 7 right now, as sort of the next thing, or the electrical infrastructure on Port Dock 5. But I think that's lower than Port Dock 7. We just, like I said, we went down there and did the normal fall tightening up of it, and there's not much left of it, really, especially out there on the outside on E&F. And, new floats over there are really a necessity. It's not, but all of it is, one of the things Terry and I have talked about here is I've noticed that when people say, oh, we're putting in for a grant, a lot of times people treat it as though they've already got the grant. And I don't think that's a wise way. That makes you rest on your laurels and not really push it real hard, first of all. Second of all, we don't have the grant. We don't have it right now. And so we always want to have some sort of contingency, or you want to be prepared for if the only thing we get is an EDA grant and we only get 50% fund match, we are going to have to put up that $1.2 million and be prepared to do it. And that's the other thing, is I have to be able to make statements toward that in the grant application. And there was one, so I found some grants, there was other ports that had put in for these things, and they passed resolutions before the port commission would pass a resolution that would say, we are going to prioritize this project so that you can't appropriate money for next year yet, but you can resolve to make it a priority to put up those matching funds when the time comes. And that would help out, I think, if we had those type of statements that say that, it's that much of a priority for us. The other thing to keep in mind is that the hardest permit to get for this project is the Army Corps permit. We have it, it's good for 4 years. So, if we really had to kick the can down the curb, we have 4 years to get it done. And with the other permits, like the remove fill permit and the city building permit, we still have to get, and that's not going to be a problem. But the other ones, we can just keep those up. But we definitely don't want to kick the can too far because it's definitely in danger of failing. So.
And you're doing that meeting tomorrow? The Uquinna Bay.
Yes, I'm going to go talk to the Uquinna Bay Economic Foundation tomorrow and let them know about the project to see if we can get them on board with it and make it. It's another outreach thing that we can do to hopefully get them to support it and more letters of support from them and anybody else we can get, and hopefully it'll come through. So
Thanks for working on Port Dock 5 and Rogue Seawall. It's two things that are front burner, and we've been talking about them for a while, and we're getting the work done. It needs to be done, so thanks.
Anyone else? Aaron, were you going to comment, or was part of your report the TCB report here?
It's included in there. A while back, the commission asked us to include those. I don't have any comments on it, though.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just wonder, are people okay with that format?
I think it's crazy. I think it's 3 minutes here and 0 minutes there. And
I don't know if we need that much accountability, but maybe as a general summary for the month, maybe it would be okay.
All right, well, I'll talk to them, see if they can filter it somehow.
Right.
Is this the kind of
It's not a
record
priority.
the port receives, though? You get these records anyway?
We get them in fits and spurts, I'd say. We get a daily report from them. We always get dailies. The monthlies are, this is the first time in like 3 months we've had one, I think. So, but we just followed up with them, Karen did, and we got it. So, but all this is just auto-generate the report, so I'm sure they can filter it to something that's a little bit more significant.
We just met with them. Do you want to talk about what
so they
pilot project that
the city ended their contract with them for parking enforcement because I think they're hiring parking enforcement officers to take it up themselves. So they have a little bit more time on their hands, and they're going to one of the biggest problems this summer especially was people parking in those fishermen's lots down there by Port Dock 5 and 3. So they're gonna probably it doesn't coincide well with the busy season, but they're going to probably push out some enforcement. And they've automated a bunch of things in their ticketing system to make it faster to put tickets out. So they're probably going to do more ticketing here in the next couple of months for us, and then give us some numbers on what it's looked like. I mean, I think a parking ticket is like $40 or something like that, so it's not like a new revenue stream for us. My main concern is enforcement, though. We want to discourage people from parking where they're not supposed to be parked. And the parking passes themselves it's mainly about just keeping people out of the spaces. I talked to Don out of the terminal the other day. He's had more, it's busier, obviously, so he did request that we implement parking passes out at the terminal as well. It's not a big financial lift for anybody, but his main problem is that he doesn't have any accountability for when people are parked where they're not supposed to be. He doesn't, he has no way to get a hold of them. He doesn't know whose vehicle it is, and then, it's not as easy if you don't have everything posted up everywhere to be able to ticket them for that type of stuff. So he asked that we get that moving, and I think we can do that. We might hear some complaints on it, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say, hey, you need a parking pass. It's $21 for a year. So, and that would work well because TCB is looking to do a bunch of enforcement right now. So if we get that forecasted to everybody and set it up for, say, January 1st, and then follow that up with an enforcement effort, and hopefully we'll get some compliance.
So I think, that all sounds good, I think, to everybody here. I think as far as the practicality of the report for the packet here, the summaries are good, and any highlights is probably, I think, what the commission was after.
Yeah, if the staff is getting a daily report, then everyone knows what's going on.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll jump into the next general manager update.
Thank you.
Terry.
So, when I had to put this together before the holiday, a lot of the things hadn't happened, and I feel like I've got more handwritten notes than I typed out on the 16th. But so, as you all know, the 19th and 20th, we had the first 2 days to kick off with Berger ABAM for the Strategic Business Plan and Capital Facilities Plan. And I think from our perspective, it went very well. And from the consultants' perspective, they were thrilled with all of the information we had gathered, background information that we presented them with. They didn't expect us to have so much background information, so that was, I think, a great benefit to them. And they conducted a dozen in-person stakeholder interviews, and we contracted with them to do 6 interviews, and I asked them if we could have more than one person in each interview so that we could have more voices heard, and they agreed to do that. So that was a great input from our stakeholder group. So we had a government partner, port partner group. We had independent seafood buyers, commercial fishermen. Okay, Jerry, I'm going to draw a blank. We had leaseholders and...
Did you say public officials?
I already did. Okay, it'll come to me. Anyway, we had a good representation of folks, and we have 2 telephone interviews, folks that we wanted interviewed that were not available because of travel, that they will conduct telephone interviews with at a later date to get that information wrapped in. We had the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats work session with the commission and staff, and a few members of the public participated in that. And then the next night we had the open house where somewhere between 24 and 30 people attended. And although I wanted to see 100 people there, they thought that was a good turnout, and they heard good feedback. And thank you to the commissioners that were able to be there and for your participation. So they are very pleased with how this launched. I was really pressuring them to launch those first 2 days before the end of the year, and they don't ordinarily do that kind of combination of activities in the first visit to a site. And so it was a bit of a risk for them, but I think they were happy with the way it turned out because we did a lot of preparation for them and did a lot of legwork in advance. And so I think it went well, and I'm glad that we got everything kicked off in November. So they now are, and Aaron spent a whole day with their facilities engineer touring the sites and talking about issues and opportunities and taking pictures. And so that was a whole nother section of work that went on while other interviews were going on with other folks. So lots going on. And we already talked briefly about the economist, Brian Winningham, who was here. He will now begin his work of market analysis and looking at sort of the financial side of things, and he'll work with Todd Kimball, as I mentioned. And so what comes of all of this interaction will be a draft report that will come to us for feedback with the consultants in a work session. And we'll do another public session where the public can come and engage and give feedback. And so but those that weren't available for the first round will still have an opportunity to come and have input. And the commission will have an opportunity to start talking with the consultants about sort of how we're going to frame these things and organize the report. I think one of the things that is really important with the report is that we come out with very specific goals that are appropriate to then pull out and plug into a work plan and into budgets as we move forward. And I know you've heard me talk about that before. I'm going to continue to bang that drum with the consultant because I think that's super important with these strategic plans so they don't just sit on a shelf. And this plan should represent 5 years worth of work for us and budgets, and we should be looking at this on an annual basis to make sure that we're keeping up with that. And I think that it's so important to the port team to have that roadmap to follow, and I think it's important to you as commissioners to understand exactly where we're headed and be able to talk about our goals and our plans, and it just makes everybody's life so much easier, I think. So that process went very well, and we should hear back from the team before the end of the year about their timeline for coming back to Newport with that draft plan, which I expect to be in the January timeframe. The Oregon Pay Equity Law project that we have been working diligently on is coming to the final phase. I thought that for today's meeting I would be able to talk to you about what the potential financial impact of the corrective actions in the pay, the compensation piece would be. We're not quite there. I did spend a half hour on the phone this afternoon with the consultant, and I'm going to have some additional conversations with Aaron and Mark about a couple of the work groups to get more clarity about similarity between and differentiations, I guess, between a couple of work groups. And then we're going to work on the pay analysis piece, which should be done. I don't even think it's optimistic to think that we'll be done by the end of the week with that, and we'll have a good understanding of the financial impact. At the beginning of this process, I was concerned the financial impact might be fairly large, but I think it's smaller than a bread box. I think it's going to be very reasonable, and I don't think that we have large pay adjustments to bring equity. I think that, and this is just my opinion at this point, and I'm not done with the process, but I think we'll be able to accommodate it in the budget that we have allocated for this fiscal year, which is, I think, the best way that we could resolve any issues we have is to do that immediately, and that's the intent of the law, and I think it would be a great thing to be able to do that. So again, that's just my view of the world right now. I may come back and say, oh, I was a little off, but I don't think I think the level of magnitude is fairly modest. So I'm feeling really good about that. And the other thing that is very clear to me after doing this process is that our compensation schedule and our classification program needs to be evaluated and tuned up. And I thought going into the pay equity project that this might take care of some of that for us, and it hasn't taken care of that piece, but what it has done is provide us with very good descriptions of the work that each individual employee is doing, which will facilitate updating job descriptions or creating job descriptions where there are none today. And so that will make it easier for us to do a classification compensation study. So more on that later, but that's sort of the second phase of taking care of our very valuable workforce. Any questions about that? It's kind of one of those track things. So the general manager recruitment is underway, as is the director of business operations recruitment. As I reported briefly at our work session, we have received 10 applications for the business operations, director of business operations position. I have not received any additional resumes for that position. Karen did some research, and we were able to post that position on League of Oregon Cities website as well, which I think is another big, broad-based website, and so that's very reasonably priced, and so I'm excited that we were able to get that posted. Thank you, Karen. And I'm in the process of trying to figure out how we will, sort of dates and times for that process once we come to a close on December 5th. And I talked to George Dunkel today to get an update on the general manager recruitment. He has received, I think, 4 resumes at this point. He has posted that job brochure on a number of websites, it's on the Port website and the SDAO website. It's on the Oregon Public Ports Association website. He also has posted it on League of Oregon Cities. And both positions have been posted on the State of Oregon Employment Division website. Pacific Northwest Waterways picked up the Director of Business Operations posting, but they told George they didn't post, job postings. And so I sent them an email saying, hey, you posted one of our positions, won't you post our other position? Because Pacific Northwest Waterways is another good website to be on. He's sending out, or has already sent out, I think he sent them yesterday, a dozen personal invitations to people to apply that have been recommended by the Executive Director of Oregon Public Ports Association, Mark Landauer. And so those are personal letters to individuals that Mark feels are a good fit for this position. And I think that might be the extent of places I know that he has those. Oh, and all of the members of the Oregon Public Port Association have received an email with the posting attached asking them to distribute it to folks they know that might be interested in the position. So that's where we are with postings, and I am in the process of working with George on finalizing a schedule for interviews on the 17th of December. Karen did another awesome job finding us a location that had enough rooms so we could move people around, and because we've got the commission interview panel and the community interview panel and then staff doing tours, and it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube sort of event trying to figure out space and times. And so it looks like, and I'll be probably sending this out before the end of the week to you all, but that day looks to start at about 7:15 a.m. with an orientation, and then interviews starting at 8, going through to 1 o'clock, and then having a group meeting with the staff and the community folks and the commissioners over lunch to talk about the feelings about the candidates and observations and input. So that could be the majority of that day for y'all. It's gonna be a busy one. And then we're looking to do 4 to 6 public meet and greet, and we're looking at doing it the Sunday late afternoon prior to the interviews on Monday the 17th. And we don't have a location secured yet.
Okay.
Not confirmed yet. Any questions? A lot on those 2 days. I'm sorry. Sometimes it just happens that way. Okay, so to your question, Jim, about the auditor. And Mark, I'll ask you to chime in where I get things wrong. Mark and I have talked with Todd Kimball, our consultant, about this, and as well as Mark's been talking with the auditors as he's been finishing chunks of work and getting those to the auditor. It appears that we don't have a schedule issue on our end. There's a schedule issue for the auditor, and they have asked us to ask for an extension, which happened last year. And I don't know all the details around that last year, but in my conversation with Todd, he feels like this is not a good practice for us to get into. It is not an acceptable practice in the eyes of the Secretary of State's office, and so we don't really have a choice. We have an agreement with the auditor to complete this audit, and they have made a commitment that they will complete it by February 28th or as early as possible, but that's the extension request. And Mark was on vacation, so I talked to Todd about how do we approach this in the future, because we have an ongoing agreement with the auditor. And so Todd's feeling is we need to have a conversation up front about the fact that we're not pleased with this occurring, and we want to have a set of deadlines and dates by which we will hold each other accountable and make sure that this doesn't happen. I think this is part of just proactively managing that relationship with a contractor and making sure that we, the customer, get what we expect. And I don't know that we are going to have, I don't anticipate there's any penalties or any issues with it. It's within ORS 297.4653A that we can do this, but I still think it's a practice that is not viewed as anything we want to be doing on a regular basis. So, anything you want to add to that? I said it all. Okay. Any other questions about that?
No, I agree. It's a poor practice, and
Yeah.
whatever we can do to not do that in the future is.
Yeah.
It seems like this is out of our hands. Our financials were ready, and she's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we periodically rotate around who our auditor is?
I don't know the answer to that.
We have in the past.
I mean, it seems like
It's
it would
true
be.
that I know, yeah, I know, I think Sydney has a 5-year contract, and before that it was a CD for maybe a 4.
Mhm.
The custody bill.
I just think, I mean, that seems healthy to have other people look at things. The
Yeah.
reason why we don't want to get, but it seems like almost, for lack of a better word, a performance issue a bit.
Yeah.
That and when you said we're on a 5-year contract,
Right.
when is?
I think this is the last year, this audit year.
So we'll take a look at on my notes to myself was we'll take a look at that contract and get through this audit process and, decide what we're going to do on the other side and take a tough look at it, because I think there's reason for us to have a conversation about this. So, and then I have a couple other things that
Oh, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I guess Todd's worked with a lot of other ports, so he may know how other contracts are structured with other ports. It may be that maybe contracts have the dates hardwired in them to a certain point, and if something's not done by a certain date, that there could be a fee to either side or something. I don't know. I'd be curious if other ports have different type contracts.
That are more specific to hold accountable.
Yeah, and if you're not going to make a date or something.
Yeah.
I'd be curious what other ports do. And you said Todd thought it'd be appropriate to have a conversation. What do you think the timing might be? Do you wait until this part's over and have it the first year? Any idea when you think it might be appropriate to?
Well, I think the first thing, I realized I should have looked at that contract before I came to the meeting, so I apologize for not having that in front of me. But what I'd like to do is see where we are in that contract and what the terms are, and get back to you with an answer on that. Because I just don't know where we are on that, so I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And then I have a couple any other questions on auditing? Okay. Just to dovetail on what Aaron talked about with the Economic Development Association grant and the Port Dock 5 project, and the need for us, being Aaron and I and you commissioners and our stakeholders locally, as well as our elected officials locally and on the national level, for us to work together to build support for this grant request, or if there's anything with Business Oregon. I'm still trying to find a meeting time when we can go to Salem and meet with those folks, and I want to meet with the Oregon Public Ports Executive Director Mark Landauer to figure out how we can help them help us. Building this support is sort of, it's kind of a mushroom thing, and the more we work these grant requests on a regular basis with our elected officials and gain letters of support within the community and the sort of region, the better chance we have at acquiring those grants. And I think we have a bit of negative history to overcome with the Coastal Caucus representatives and senators, and I think we've already started those conversations with that group, and I think many of them have heard from me directly, if not from some of you, about the port's desire to continue to do great work, and we need their support, and how can we get over this hump and get there. And so I'm just really committed to working with you all and working with Aaron and figuring out the best strategy to do that. And the best place for us to start, and Stuart and I have talked quite a bit about this, and Sarah, you met with, the three of us met with Representative Gomberg, and now that the election is over, I've reached out to him and I've asked him if he would be able to come and help us sort of strategize about the best way to connect with the Coastal Caucus. They meet every Tuesday during the session at 7 a.m. in the morning in Salem, and they invite people to come and be on their agenda. And so I think there are multiple opportunities for us to be in front of them talking about this project or other projects, and talking about the strategic business plan. And I mean, I'm prepared to start taking drafts of the strategic business plan to demonstrate that we're working very diligently to have that document ready to go, and have grant requests ready to go, and that, Aaron's done a lot of work on this EDA grant, and so I just think this is a huge priority for us in terms of strategic communications, and really getting out in front of this and doing the best we can to get the funding for this project, or the majority of the funding for the project, secured as soon as we can, because I'm really concerned about that Port Dock 5 pier structure, and the impacts are enormous, and so of failure. And so I just think we really need to put our heads together. So I contacted Representative Gomberg. He is not available. I invited him to come tonight. He's not available tonight. And next month on the 18th, he's up in Portland at a 4 o'clock meeting. It's not going to work for him to be here either. So my guess is between now and the end of December is our window, because the session starts for him in Salem with legislative days the week of January 12th, and then the next week, starting the 22nd, they're in session. So he's not going to be available to us to come in and talk with. So I'm going to work with his staffer to see. I'm assuming we'll have a work session or some opportunity when we could have him come and talk to us about how we can connect and really start those communications and how to be as proactive as possible. And so, and just to keep our finger on the pulse of any bills coming up that we need to be on top of. So I'm working on that. I just want to let you all know about that. And I will have more information about if there are opportunities for us to go and meet with Business Oregon or other folks that are working with these elected officials as well, that, sort of to tag team this. It doesn't have to be any one of us or two of us that are always doing it. I think it's better if they hear from a variety of voices and if we kind of spread ourselves out. So, and the other thing that I think is very valuable that's coming up is the Pacific Northwest Waterways mission to DC to talk to our federal delegation, and that agenda will be out the middle of next month, and that's in March. And so I think that that's totally appropriate for some commissioners to go to, and whether I'm sitting in this seat or somebody else is in this seat, I think the GM needs to go, and I think we need to work those relationships as well. So I'll keep you updated on those details as I get that information, but those kinds of trips are important. And I think there's going to be a port day at the legislature that Mark Landauer is setting up as well, and that would be another opportunity to go to Salem and be focused information on ports. So and along those lines, thanks to Aaron, I learned about the Association of Pacific Ports they're having a seminar on Thursday up in Seattle that I am going to. I didn't know if I could make the schedule work, but I'm going to go. And it's all about communications to better engage your community and work with political bodies. And there's a number of consultants that do strategic communication work specifically for ports that are going to be there presenting. So I'll come back with a wealth of information and contacts, and so that I think that will be a really good opportunity. And the only other thing I'm going to talk to you about is 2 sentences here that I checked in with George Dunkel on scheduling the board training that we had talked about. It looks like he has time in the first couple weeks in February, and just to remind you what we were talking about, we would basically host a regional training for other public boards that would want to come and participate here in Newport, and George would lead that session. So that's not until February. All kinds of time. So that's it. Any questions?
Anybody have anything for Terry? Thanks for jumping on that special meeting as well. I know it's the last minute. You're talking a couple of days from now you're going to be in Seattle.
Yeah,
So,
Thursday morning.
yeah.
So you just
7
fly in
a.m.
and fly out.
They call it the fly-in, fly-out
fly-in.
seminar, because it's at SeaTac in their conference center. How convenient is that?
I think that's
It
brilliant.
was a drive fly for me, but it works.
And that's a big PR. I mean, it's to help develop PR for ports as
Yeah,
well, right?
I mean, it's all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm actually working on formalizing a part-time communications person. I have a few more conversations to go to, but I think I'll have somebody to help us with actually updating and writing some of the information that needs to be plugged into the new website, because a lot of the descriptive material needs to be fluffed up a bit, if you will, and also needs to be tuned up in terms of facts, and then to really help us get some of those things posted that you all were talking about earlier, you know, what's going on at the terminal this month, and some pictures and a little blurb about that, and what's going on at South Beach, or, you know. So we're working on that. Lots of things.
Great. Okay, anyone else? The next agenda item here is any commissioner reports or comments. Jeff, anything?
Just quickly, I wanted to make a suggestion, I don't know if it's a question or a suggestion, about just taking a look at revenue streams, and are all revenue streams being captured, and looking at reviewing processes on how revenue streams are captured. You know, is all the money that should be coming to the port coming to the port? I could be more specific, but I think you know what I mean. Just, you know, for every time there's a forklift, or there's a whatever service or fee should be applied, is it getting applied?
So just as a quick response, Aaron and Mark and I have talked about that issue, and we've been talking about sort of the when we get really slammed and things get forgotten, or where are the gaps in our system, and that's when those kinds of things happen, when people don't get charged appropriately. And I think our feeling is that isn't happening an excessive amount, but we're sure that can happen. It's human error, and it's bound to happen. And Aaron and I were talking today about how we can tighten things up, and how we can prepare ourselves better for the busy rushes that we know are going to come seasonally, and how we do that in a way that we don't just have people standing around, but we do it in a way that we've sort of planned into that and understand, you know, what the situation is that we're planning for, and we staff appropriately. So I think our plan would be to dive a little more in detail into that and communicate with you where our plan's going to be, and come back and talk to you about it. But I think there's some things we're doing to prepare for you know, the crab season, and some things that we're putting in motion already that Aaron was already doing. And I think just having more people helps us be more accurate with those kinds of things as well. So we're working on it.
Thank you. That sounds good.
Yes, sir. There's a lot of fishermen out on the streets and everywhere right now, getting ready for crabbing, redoing all their boats from Alaska. So I'm running into fishermen, and, well, is that fishing group still alive, or what's going on there? And I just tell them, well, we got, you know, deer hunting, elk hunting, crab opener, holidays that there were. But anyway, I'm not out of line, I hope, in saying that we had talked about who calls the meeting. And I just tell fishermen, if there's some issue that fishermen need the port to consider, they can get a hold of the manager and get that going, or vice versa. If we as a commission really want them to weigh in on something, then we would initiate it. So I think it might be worth trying to have a meeting to straighten out because they haven't met for a while, and there's been no communication with each other to know what's going on. So it might be good just to have a meeting after the holidays to shore up the group and their bylaws, and let everyone know it's still an advisory capacity kind of group.
And I think I read that they had said, you know, you Port Commission, give us an agenda that we can come and respond to. And so maybe we can talk a little bit more offline about what are the issues that we really want some feedback on, and you know. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, I've just reassured them that it certainly is still a viable
Yeah,
committee.
I'd be happy to hear from
Yeah.
any of them.
Oh, I direct them all to you. too.
Oh, I love that. I want my phone to ring off the hook.
Good.
Anything else? I did just very briefly want to mention that, as Terry alluded to, after our SWAT session on whatever that was, Monday the 19th, Terry and I rushed out of here and made a quick presentation to the City Council on the status, a little bit of background on our strategic business planning process, and gave them an update on the schedule and those kinds of things. And I think they appreciated the update, and I think it continues to show again the importance of that process, but also that we're doing everything we can to engage the public in it as well. So that's all I have. I'll jump into, unless there's anything else, I'm going to jump into the calendar and future considerations. Association of Pacific Ports seminar on the 29th. The holiday party, 12th, on the 7th rather. Cascades West Area Commission on Transportation meeting on the 13th. Our regular commission meeting on the 18th. And that the port office will be closed for Christmas. That being said, this is another opportunity for any public comment. Anyone from the public like to make a comment? State your name. You have 5 minutes to make a statement. Anyone? Okay. Nothing heard? Then I will adjourn the meeting at 7:46. Thanks.